What if the thing you've been trying to fix out there was never the real problem to begin with? What if money, relationships, delays, and even opportunities aren't reacting to effort, but to identity? Neville Goddard taught something that feels confronting at first, yet strangely relieving. Your outer world isn't controlling you, it's revealing you. And the moment you stop fighting circumstances and start changing the inner position you live from, reality begins to move in ways that feel almost effortless. This isn't about positive thinking or hoping harder. It's about understanding a law that's already working, whether you know it or not, and learning how to finally work with it. He starts with a simple but unsettling idea. What you see around you isn't happening to you, it's happening from you. The outer world reflects your inner world, Neville Goddard spoke about so often, even when that reflection feels unfair. Most people wake up reacting to circumstances as if life were attacking them. Yet Neville Goddard insisted that life is responding, not initiating. That thought alone makes people pause and think, wait, could this be about me? Think about how often someone says, money is hard to come by, without even noticing it. Years later, their bank account echoes that sentence perfectly, almost word for word. This isn't punishment or luck, it's alignment with an inner assumption. The law of assumption explained simply says, reality organizes itself around what feels true inside. The outer scene just follows orders, quietly and consistently. He often compares life to a faithful mirror that never argues back. If you frown into a mirror, it doesn't smile out of pity. In the same way, the world cannot contradict the inner image you hold of yourself. Change in a world manifestation isn't a poetic idea, it's a practical necessity. Until the inner posture changes, the outer stance stays the same. Many people misunderstand this and think it means blaming themselves. It doesn't. It means reclaiming authorship. When you realize imagination creates reality, you stop feeling like a victim of random events. You begin to sense that every outcome has a psychological root. He recalls hearing family phrases like, "That's just how life is," or "People like us don't get ahead." Those lines sink deep and quietly script future experiences. Years later, the same person wonders why the same patterns repeat. This is yourself pushed out Neville style, operating with precision, not emotion. Notice how the world reacts differently depending on your inner mood. On days you feel confident, doors seem to open effortlessly. On days filled with doubt, everything feels heavier and slower. That contrast isn't coincidence, it's feedback. The outer world is reporting your inner state in real time. This is why Neville Goddard never told people to fight circumstances. He taught them to adjust identity. When the self-concept shifts, reactions soften, and situations reorganize without force. The mirror doesn't need fixing. The image does. Once this clicks, people stop chasing outcomes and start examining assumptions. They begin to see money, relationships, and opportunities as effects, not causes. This is where real power quietly enters the room. And that power becomes clearer when you look at one bold idea Neville emphasized next. Neville took that mirror idea even further and said something that sounds almost shocking at first. Life is yourself pushed out. Every person, every delay, every opportunity is shaped by assumptions you carry within. It's not that others don't have free will, but that your inner state decides how they show up in your story. Once you hear this, you can't unhear it. Think about a time when you expected rejection before even speaking. Somehow the conversation confirmed exactly that fear. Another day, feeling relaxed and sure of yourself, people responded warmly without effort. Same people, different outcomes. That's your self-pushed out Neville Goddard style, working behind the scenes with surgical precision. He explained that assumptions aren't just thoughts you repeat, they're quiet conclusions you live from. What feels normal, obvious, and unquestioned inside becomes law outside. This is the law of assumption explained without mysticism or force. Life doesn't ask what you want, it responds to what you assume is true. Many people try affirmations while still feeling undeserving underneath. They say, "I am abundant," but carry an inner shrug that says, "Yeah, right." The world listens to the shrug, not the sentence. Feeling it real, Neville Goddard taught, isn't about hype. It's about internal agreement. When the feeling changes, behavior and results follow naturally. He often used everyday examples to make this clear. If you assume someone dislikes you, you unconsciously act guarded, cold, or defensive. The other person senses it and responds in kind, confirming your belief. Then you say, "See, I knew it." But what you're really seeing is your own assumption returning. This is why trying to control people never works long-term. Control is effort, assumption is influence. When you change how you see yourself in relation to others, their behavior adjusts without confrontation. The outer world reflects your inner world, Neville Goddard described, down to tone, timing, and chance encounters. Money works the same way. Someone who assumes money is stressful meets constant financial friction. Someone who assumes money is supportive notices solutions appearing at the right time. Same economy, same rules, different inner stance. Reality doesn't discriminate, it mirrors. Once you grasp this, blaming others loses its appeal, not because you're wronged less, but because you understand the mechanism. Responsibility becomes freedom instead of burden. And naturally, the next question arises. If everything flows from self, what happens when you try to change results without changing who you are? One of the most common traps is trying to fix the reflection instead of the source. People change jobs, relationships, cities, even affirmations, yet the same patterns keep resurfacing. Neville Goddard warned that the mirror cannot show a new image until the inner picture changes. Results are effects, never causes, no matter how convincing they look. It's like repainting a cracked wall without fixing the foundation. For a moment, everything looks better, and hope rises again. Then the cracks return, sometimes worse than before. This is why change inner world manifestation is not optional. It's structural. The inner self is the blueprint every outer detail follows. He often pointed out how people say, "If only this one thing would change, I'd finally feel at peace." But peace doesn't come from rearranging circumstances. Peace comes from occupying a new state of being. Live in the end means feeling the relief, confidence, or security before the evidence appears. Think of someone chasing financial success while secretly feeling inadequate. They may earn more, yet anxiety grows alongside income. The outer win doesn't heal the inner conflict. Feeling is the secret, Neville insisted, because feeling reveals identity. Until identity shifts, results remain unstable. This is where many misunderstand the wish-fulfilled Neville method. They imagine scenes but keep checking reality for proof. The moment nothing changes, doubt creeps back in. But imagination creates reality only when it becomes more real than appearances. Otherwise, it's just daydreaming with pressure attached. He used the mirror analogy again and again because it's impossible to argue with. You don't ask a mirror to smile first. You smile, and the mirror complies instantly. In life, the delay makes people forget the sequence, but the law hasn't changed. This also explains why forcing positivity feels exhausting. You're trying to override an identity instead of replacing it. True inner change feels natural, almost boring, because it's familiar. When the assumption shifts, effort drops away. Once people see this, they stop asking, "How do I get this?" and start asking, "Who am I being?" That question cuts straight to the root. And interestingly, the answer often shows up through emotional reactions, which Neville treated as powerful indicators. Neville often said that reactions are more honest than words. How you feel about what happens exposes the inner state you're living from, without filters or excuses. You might say you're confident, but if a small delay triggers anxiety, something deeper is speaking. The outer world reflects your inner world, Neville Goddard style, especially through emotional responses. Think about two people facing the same problem. One panics, the other stays calm. The situation didn't change, but the inner position did. Reactions are not personality traits, they're signals. They show which assumption is active in the moment. He taught that irritation, jealousy, or fear are not enemies to suppress. They're indicators pointing inward. If a comment feels threatening, it's touching an identity that feels unstable. That's useful information, not failure. Feeling is the secret because it reveals what you truly believe. Many people try to control reactions by being positive, yet the tension remains underneath. That's like holding a smile while your jaw aches. True change comes from shifting the assumption that created the reaction in the first place. The law of assumption explained emotionally always shows up as feeling first. Money offers a clear example. If a bill arrives and your chest tightens, that reaction reveals an assumption about scarcity or insecurity. Someone else may see the same bill and feel neutral or even confident. Same paper, different inner story. This is why Neville Goddard emphasized self-observation over self-judgment. You don't scold yourself for reactions, you study them. They're messages from the subconscious, showing you the state you're occupying. Ignore them, and the pattern repeats. Once you start noticing reactions, life becomes a feedback system instead of a battlefield. Each emotional spike points to an assumption asking to be revised. That's far more efficient than trying to fix dozens of outer situations. Over time, reactions soften, not because life becomes perfect, but because identity becomes steadier. And when you understand reactions as mirrors, a natural practice begins to form, one Neville considered essential when something unwanted shows up. Neville offered a deceptively simple practice when something unwanted appears. Pause. That pause alone interrupts years of automatic reactions. Instead of blaming the event, he suggested asking a quiet but powerful question. What inner belief is this reflecting? In that moment, the outer world reflects your inner world Neville Goddard spoke about, and you're finally listening. Most people rush straight into fixing, worrying, or explaining. They argue with reality as if it was stubborn or unfair. But the law of assumption, explained gently, says the scene is already complete. It's just showing you yesterday's assumption, playing out on today's stage. Once the question is asked, the next step is not analysis but imagination. Neville Goddard taught to imagine the scene resolved from the end, not how it happens, not who changes, but how it feels once it's done. This is the wish-fulfilled Neville method in its purest form. For example, if money feels tight, don't imagine stacks of cash with desperation. Imagine the calm of bills paid, the ease of checking your account without tension. Feeling it real Neville Goddard style means sensing relief, not excitement. Relief signals completion. He often warned against imagining to get something. That keeps you in the state of lack. Instead, imagine from fulfillment. Live in the end, as if the problem no longer needs attention. The inner shift is subtle, like exhaling after holding your breath. This practice doesn't deny what you see. It reassigns meaning. The outer world may still show the old pattern for a while, but you're no longer feeding it emotionally. Imagination creates reality when it becomes your inner reference point. Appearances slowly lose authority. People are surprised by how small the imaginal act can be. Sometimes it's just a short inner scene before sleep or a quiet moment during the day. Neville insisted it should feel natural, almost ordinary. Strain is a sign you're still trying. Over time, this habit builds trust in the inner world. Instead of reacting, you revise. Instead of fearing, you assume. And without realizing it, you begin to feel differently about events before they change, setting the stage for the emotional mechanism Neville emphasized next. Neville was unwavering about one thing. Feeling is the mechanism of change. Not effort, not repetition, not force, feeling. Gratitude, peace, and quiet certainty are not rewards that come later. They are signals that the inner shift has already occurred. Feeling is the secret because it announces a new state has been occupied. Many people mistake emotion for excitement. They think manifestation requires high energy or constant positivity. Neville Goddard taught the opposite. The feeling of the wish-fulfilled Neville method feels calm, settled, even normal. When something is truly yours inside, you stop checking for it. Think about something you already have, like your name. You don't affirm it all day or feel emotional about it. It's simply assumed. That's the same inner posture required for money, freedom, or security. The law of assumption works through naturalness, not intensity. Gratitude plays a key role here, but not forced gratitude. It's the quiet thankfulness that comes from knowing something is handled. Peace is even more revealing. When anxiety fades without an outer reason, that's a sign the assumption has shifted. Neville Goddard often said that emotions are states, not reactions. When you feel secure before evidence appears, you're living in the end. The outer world reflects your inner world Neville Goddard style by reorganizing itself to match that feeling. It has no choice. This is why trying to feel better rarely works. You don't chase feelings, you change assumptions. Feelings follow identity automatically. When you see yourself as safe, supported, and capable, emotions align without effort. People notice this shift subtly. They stop complaining as much. They respond instead of react. Decisions feel clearer. These are inner confirmations long before outer confirmation arrives. Imagination creates reality, but feeling seals the deal. When you trust this mechanism, you stop micromanaging life. You let the old story play out while the new one takes root. And when the outer world seems slow to catch up, Neville had a very specific perspective on why that happens. When the outer world lags, Neville warned against the instinct to argue with it. Complaining, forcing, or reacting emotionally only keeps attention locked on an old assumption. The delay isn't failure, it's momentum. What you're seeing is yesterday's belief taking its final bow. He often compared this to turning a large ship at sea. The wheel turns first, but the ship responds slowly. Inner change happens instantly. Outer change unfolds in time. The law of assumption explained this lag as natural, not discouraging. Impatience doesn't speed it up, it reinforces doubt. Many people abandon the process right here. They say, "I tried this and nothing happened," not realizing something is happening internally. Feeling it real, Neville Goddard taught, means trusting the inner shift even when evidence hasn't caught up. The unseen always leads the seen. Arguing with appearances is like shouting at an echo. The sound you hear is already on its way back. When you react with fear or frustration, you send out the same signal again. The outer world reflects your inner world Neville Goddard style with perfect accuracy, even during transitions. Neville encouraged people to let the old scene exhaust itself. Don't wrestle with it. Don't assign meaning to it. Treat it like a rerun you've already outgrown. When you stop feeding it emotionally, it loses power quickly. This is where faith becomes practical, not religious. Faith is loyalty to the unseen assumption you've chosen. Live in the end means behaving internally as if the matter is settled. Calm persistence outweighs emotional effort every time. People often notice that when they finally let go, things shift suddenly. But letting go doesn't mean giving up. It means withdrawing attention from the old story. Imagination creates reality, but attention sustains it. Once this clicks, waiting feels different. It's no longer tense or desperate. It's relaxed, almost curious. And soon, subtle signs begin to appear. Small but unmistakable clues that alignment is already underway. Neville said that before the big changes arrive, small shifts whisper first. These early signs of alignment are easy to miss if you're only watching for dramatic results. Calmer reactions, lighter thoughts, and a sense of ease often show up quietly. The outer world reflects your inner world, Neville Goddard style, starting from the inside out. One of the first signs is emotional space. Things that used to trigger frustration or fear suddenly don't hit as hard. You notice yourself responding instead of reacting. That's not coincidence. It's evidence that an assumption has softened. Feeling is the secret, and your emotions are already telling the story. Then come synchronicities. You hear the right phrase at the right time, stumble upon a book recommendation, or have a conversation that mirrors your new thinking. Neville Goddard saw these not as magic, but as alignment. When imagination creates reality, life starts arranging itself naturally around your inner state. People also begin to respond differently, sometimes without explanation. Someone becomes kinder. An opportunity appears where there was resistance before. This is yourself pushed out, Neville, in motion, reflecting your shifted self-concept. You didn't persuade them, you changed position internally. Money-related shifts often begin as relief rather than increase. A bill gets delayed, help appears unexpectedly, or a solution feels obvious instead of stressful. The law of assumption explained doesn't always bring instant abundance. It first removes pressure. Peace is often the doorway. Another subtle sign is detachment. You still want the outcome, but you're no longer obsessed with it. You stop checking constantly. That ease signals you're living closer to the wish-fulfilled Neville method. When something feels done inside, urgency fades. Neville reminded people not to worship signs. Signs follow, they don't lead. If you start chasing them, you move back into doubt. Trust the inner shift more than the external hints. Live in the end, not in interpretation. Over time, these small confirmations build quiet confidence. You begin to trust your inner world more than circumstances, and that trust deepens into something even stronger, a knowing that the unseen always governs the seen. Deep embodiment begins when you trust the inner world more than appearances. At this stage, you're no longer shaken by temporary evidence because you understand its source. The unseen feels more real than what's in front of your eyes. Neville Goddard taught that when this happens, doubt loses its grip. People at this level don't deny reality, they contextualize it. They see circumstances as delayed messages, not final verdicts. The outer world reflects your inner world, Neville Goddard described. But now you read that reflection with discernment instead of fear. You know what you're seeing is already outdated. This trust changes how you move through daily life. Decisions feel cleaner, less emotional. You stop asking everyone for validation because your inner knowing carries more weight. The law of assumption explained here becomes lived experience, not theory. There's also a noticeable shift in patience. Waiting no longer feels like waiting. It feels like allowing. Live in the end becomes your default posture, not something you practice occasionally. You assume the unseen must obey because it always has. Neville often said that faith is loyalty to an unseen reality. At this depth, faith isn't dramatic or loud. It's quiet confidence. You don't need signs because certainty has replaced hope. Imagination creates reality, and you trust imagination more than news, numbers, or opinions. This is where many people notice they stop over-explaining themselves. They don't defend their assumptions. They simply live from them. Feeling it real Neville Goddard style means the new identity feels natural, even obvious. Outer challenges may still arise, but they don't define you anymore. You meet them from a stable center instead of emotional urgency. That stability is the embodiment Neville pointed toward, a calm authority over your inner world. And when you live from that place, one truth becomes undeniable. The mirror has no choice but to follow, which brings everything back to the core principle Neville never stopped emphasizing. Neville always brought everything back to one central truth. Your outer world is only a reflection of your inner world. Not sometimes, not symbolically, but always. What you experience is the echo of what you consistently assume to be true. Once this sinks in, life stops feeling random. Most people live as if the mirror leads and they follow. Neville Goddard reversed that logic completely. Change within first, and reality must mirror the truth you assume. The law of assumption explained at this level becomes less about technique and more about identity. When you truly grasp this, you stop begging life for proof. You no longer wait for permission to feel secure, abundant, or valued. Feeling is the secret, because it declares internally, "This is who I am now." And the world has no option but to agree. This doesn't mean ignoring challenges or pretending everything is perfect. It means understanding their origin. You see problems as signals, not threats. The outer world reflects your inner world Neville Goddard style, even when it's revealing something you're ready to outgrow. People often ask how long it takes for reality to change. Neville's answer was indirect but clear. It takes as long as it takes for you to stop wavering internally. When imagination creates reality, consistency of assumption matters more than time. Living this way feels lighter. You take responsibility without pressure. You release blame without denial. Your self-pushed out Neville Goddard becomes obvious in conversations, finances, and opportunities. Life starts responding instead of resisting. At this point, practice becomes lifestyle. Live in the end isn't something you do, it's where you operate from. The wish-fulfilled Neville method feels less like a method and more like common sense. And once you see that every outer shift begins as an inner decision, a deeper question naturally arises. If everything mirrors you, what kind of inner truth are you choosing to live from next? Now, take a quiet moment and ask yourself something honestly. If your outer world is a reflection, what has your inner world been showing lately? Where have you been reacting instead of assuming, waiting instead of living in the end? These teachings aren't meant to be admired, they're meant to be lived. The real shift begins when you stop asking life to change and start choosing who you are within it. So the next time something triggers you, pause. What assumption is asking to be revised? What would it feel like to trust the unseen more than what's in front of your eyes? Neville Goddard reminded us that imagination creates reality, and feeling is the secret that seals it. When you change the inner conversation, the outer world has no option but to follow. If this message resonated with you, stay close. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next insight that could quietly transform how you experience money, life, and yourself. The more you understand this law, the more consciously you'll begin to live by it.